Now the master smith was a dwarf named Geridor, and he was also a powerful magician. When Skimir told him of the problem, the dwarf shook his head and said such a task required powerful enchantments and a good deal of time. Skimir left for Asgard with instructions to come back in a month's time. After the month had passed, he returned, and the dwarf had completed the task. To Skimir's surprise, what Geridor had made was not a chain, but a silken rope. Skimir could not hide his disappointment, and began to protest. "A silken cord to bind Fenrir? Are you mad? Do you realize how strong the beast is, how large he has grown?" Geridor let him go on a bit before giving him a goblet of elf mead and saying to him, "Don't be deceived by appearances. This is a very special rope, and it's taken me this long to make because I have had to find 6 very special ingredients." Increasingly perplexed, Skimir huffed skeptically. "What special ingredients? It looks like an ordinary silk rope to me." Whispering confidentially into Skimir's ear, as if he did not want anyone to overhear his trade secrets, Geridor said, "The spit of a bird, the nerves of a bear, the breath of a fish, the roots of a mountain, the beard of a woman, and the sound of a cat's footfall." The incredulous Skimir spluttered protestingly. "The sound of a cat's footfall? The spit of a bird? The beard of a woman? Are you mad? These things don't exist." Geridor looked over his shoulder and from side to side as if to make sure no one was eavesdropping, and hissed, "That's why they're so hard to find, stupid." Not knowing what to think, Skimir paid for the rope and set off back to Asgard, shaking his head and muttering to himself. When the gods saw the silken cord, they laughed at Skimir and claimed that he had been cheated, and an argument broke out. But Odin silenced their wagging tongues, for he knew that Geridor's fame was well-founded, and insisted that they must try to bind Fenrir with the cord. So a group of the bravest and strongest gods set out to confront Tyr, and when they found him, they asked him to come with them to the wastelands lying beyond Asgard and Niflheim. The wolf, who was by now as big as a full-grown dragon, felt that he was so strong he had nothing to fear from any god. He smiled, agreeing to go with them. So they set off northwards, and Fenrir padded along confidently in their company. They took a ferry across the dark lake Amsvartnir, and Tyr suggested disembarking on the island of Lyngvi for a spot of hunting, as there were huge fat oxen there that tasted delicious roasted on an open fire. Fenrir growled, "I prefer my meat hot, raw and bloody, not burned and crisp by fire, and I like to kill it myself. But I'm hungry, so let's do as you say." Once on the island, the gods killed and roasted a huge ox, and were horrified to see the enormous appetite of Fenrir, who hunted down and gobbled up at least 20 while they were eating. His great appetite temporarily satiated, Fenrir sat down licking his chops, occasionally glancing at the gods as they washed down their foods with jugs of beer. Finally Tyr stood up and said, "Oh, Fenrir, I hope that little snack has left you feeling strong, because I've come across a rope none of the gods can snap, and I bet you won't be able to either." Fenrir eyed the silken rope, which was called Gleipnir, and he snarled, "Bah, it looks like a shoelace. Snapping that's hardly going to enhance my reputation, is it?" One by one the gods tried to convince him to let himself be bound, but he sensed a trap and would not let them persuade him. Eventually Odin said, "Look, Fenrir, if you let us bind you, and then you cannot snap this little rope, then we'll know you're not as strong as everyone says you are, won't we? And so there'll be no need for us to fear you, will there? In which case, we'll release you. Oh, come on, be a sport. What are you afraid of?" Sensing trickery and having the cunning of a wolf as well as the blood of the god of mischief flowing through his veins, but not wanting to seem cowardly, Fenrir replied, "I'm not too keen on this, and I don't really trust you Asgardians, but I'll let you try and bind me on one condition, that one of you puts his hand in my mouth, so that if I cannot break free, I have some guarantee that you will release me afterwards, or one of you loses his right hand. So, what's it to be then, eh? Who feels brave?" Now looking into the great black wolf's baleful green eyes and the huge grinning mouth filled with teeth like razor-sharp daggers, no one wanted to try their hand. But Tyr, who was the bravest of all, realizing that this would be their last and only opportunity to try and bind the monster, stepped forward saying, "What an untrusting cuss you are, Fenrir. It's only a game, isn't it? Come on then, I'll play if you will." With that, he put his right hand, his sword hand, in Fenrir's mighty jaws, and the great wolf grinned contentedly as the gods set about tying him with silken rope. When the final knot was tied, the wolf strained and struggled, but the more he struggled, the tighter the rope bit into him, causing him to whine with pain more than once. At last he had to admit defeat, and demanded to be freed. The delighted gods just laughed and jeered at his request, all except Tyr, who knew what was coming next. The enraged wolf bit through the war god's wrist and swallowed his hand in a single gulp. Blood spurted everywhere, and Baldur went to the screaming Tyr's assistance as the monster howled its shame and rage at having been tricked and bound by the Asgardians. To be doubly sure, and to prevent the wolf from hobbling away to look for help, Odin took another chain, as thick as Dromi had been, and passed it through the rope. Then, fixing it to a metal spike, he drove it down deep into the granite floor of the island, and then the gods picked up an enormous boulder, and they placed it on top of the spike, so that no one could try to dig it out. Fenrir could still move his head, and he growled and snarled and snapped at the Asgardians in his rage, and then began to howl for help. As he howled, Tyr, the stump of his right wrist now bandaged, took his sword in his left hand and jammed it in Fenrir's mouth, the pommel digging into the lower jaw and the point sticking into its palate, so that he could neither bite nor howl. The look of hate and rage in the wolf's eyes would have frightened a mortal man to death, but at last he was safely bound. And that is what the gods did with Fenrir the wolf, the third son of evil Loki, and why the war god Tyr has only one hand.